Margaret Hartwell felt the familiar jolt of anticipation the moment her fingers brushed the scuffed leather case. It lay beneath a folding card table overloaded with mismatched glassware at the Radcliffe estate sale. A faint red Leica logo peeked from a crack in the lid. She lifted the case, opened it, and there it was, a 1955 Leica M3, brass edges worn to a warm glow. She caught her reflection in the viewfinder, grey streaks weaving through her auburn hair. When she rotated the advance lever, the resistance told her a roll of film still lived inside. It was an archivist's siren call. She paid the asking price, more than she'd planned to spend on a whim, but William Radcliffe had been a well-travelled photojournalist in the 50s, and every inch of her instinct said the camera would hold stories worth rescuing. The October afternoon was crisp enough to sting her cheeks as she loaded her haul into the trunk. She'd come for spare enlarger bulbs, and maybe a brownie to salvage for parts. She left with 3 battered camera bags, a brass trophy from a 1968 Press Association dinner, and nerves buzzing like a loose power cable. While traffic crawled along Riverfront Boulevard, she kept imagining the undeveloped negatives, frozen secrets emulsified in silver halide for half a century. She wondered if any images would survive at all. Time could bleach chemistry as ruthlessly as it did memory. Her bungalow sat at the edge of the old Heights district, where porches sagged and trees clawed at telephone wires. She hurried down the hall to her dark room, flicking on the red safe light and draping towels across the bottom of the door. Steam curled from the developer tray. She exhaled, forcing the day's mundane chatter, office emails, grocery lists out of her mind. Here, burrowed in the womb-dark glow, only exposure, contrast, and timing mattered. When she cracked the Leica's back open, the film leader snapped free with a delicate sigh. Kodak Tri-X, 36 exposures, vintage black and white grains so forgiving you could murder focus and still yield art. She unspooled the film onto a stainless spiral, sealed it in the canister, and poured developer. 11 minutes. During the agitation cycles, she glanced around at the shelves of cameras she'd resurrected. A Greyflex speed graphic, a Polish Start 66 twin lens, half a dozen Soviet Zenits. All had produced ghosts, but mostly benign ones. A couple laughing at Niagara in 1957, kids playing stickball under tenements, a sailor kissing someone else's sweetheart. Her hobby, some would say obsession, was part historical rescue, part voyeurism, part cosmic dice roll. She never knew what world would bloom when silver met light again. Fix, rinse, photo flow. At last, she flipped on the overhead light and lifted the wet negatives to the ceiling bulb. The strip trembled between her fingers like a dragonfly wing. A dense series of exposures marched down the first length. A garden party, men in crisp dinner jackets, women in satiny cocktail dresses. She recognized Radcliffe in frame 6 by the streak of white in his oil-slick hair. He was smiling at a slender blonde, lifting a martini glass. Frame 16, 17. The group moved onto a moonlit veranda where paper lanterns hung. Nothing unusual. She clipped the negatives to the line, set a fan blowing low, and went to brew coffee while they dried. An hour later, she slipped the first strip into the enlarger and cast the image onto a piece of printing paper. The garden party sprang to life like a lost scene from a Hitchcock reel. She printed 3 more frames, turning them under the red light after 90 seconds in developer. Swirls of dancers, out-of-focus laughter, a champagne cork mid-flight. On the 4th print, she paused. Something dark fogged the corner. No, not fog. A figure. She dodged a highlight, burned shadows, brought it into clarity. A man in the background, trenchcoat collar up, hat brim low, face half hidden. He wasn't laughing or drinking. He was staring dead into Radcliffe's camera. His eyes were level, assessing, the way a hunter studies quarry through brush. Margaret frowned, but chalked it up to coincidence. She shifted to the final strip. The last 3 frames looked underexposed. She opened the enlarger aperture and added 30 seconds. Gradually, shapes surfaced. A deserted hallway, ornate wallpaper, a gilded mirror catching the flash. The next frame, the same hallway, but the camera angle lower, as if shot from the hip. A smear across the corner suggested the photographer was moving fast. On the final frame, the image resolved, and everything inside Margaret tightened. It was the blonde from earlier, slumped against the hallway's wainscoting, eyes open but lifeless. A dark bloom spread across the bodice of her satin dress. The hunter from the background crouched beside her, one gloved hand wrapped around her throat, as though to confirm the absence of a pulse. The muzzle of a small pistol peeked from his other hand. The lens must have discharged the flash automatically. Radcliffe's Leica mounted a bulb bracket, and that flash had captured murder in artisanal black and white. The killer's face, this time, was fully illuminated. Margaret's stomach lurched. She stared at the image until the developer stains on her gloves grew cold. It could be a macabre stage play, she told herself, but the sawdust sheen of powder on the pistol and the ragged shine in the victim's eyes said otherwise. The photograph crackled with the brutal immediacy no reenactment could fake. She removed it from the tray, rinsed, hung it to dry, and pressed trembling palms against her temples. William Radcliffe had died last February at 92. A celebrated chronicler of civil rights marches and Vietnam firefights. Everyone at the estate sale assumed he'd simply forgotten to process old personal rolls. But why had he never shown this one? Had he been afraid or complicit? She called Detective Alan Reyes, an old college friend who owed her more than a few favours after she'd supplied him vintage prints for his wedding. His voicemail answered, "On night duty, leave a message." She texted a photo of the contact sheet with the victim cropped. "Alan, need advice. Crime photo, possibly real. Long story. Call ASAP." She hesitated, thumb hovering, then attached the frame with the killer's face. Hit send. While waiting, she scoured the internet for Radcliffe's assignments. In October 1962, he'd been in Havana during the missile crisis. In 63, the March on Washington. Mid-65, Saigon. Nothing about swanky garden parties. The blonde, no match in public obituaries. The hallway's wallpaper had a distinctive chinoiserie pattern, cranes and twisted pines. She copied the print, high-res scan, and ran it through an image search. No hits. The phone rang near midnight. "Maggie, it's Reyes. Where did you get that frame?" She relayed the estate sale, the Leica, the undeveloped roll. He listened, tapping keys in the background. "That man," Reyes said, "looks a hell of a lot like Robert Kincaid." Should I know him? Old rumours. Freelance fixer for certain agencies back in the Cold War. Never indicted, plenty of bodies left in his wake. If that's him, your negatives are dynamite. "Statute of limitations on murder never runs," she whispered. "True, but evidence chain of custody will be a nightmare. And if Kincaid's alive, he won't appreciate resurrection." A chill slithered across her neck. "What do we do?" "I'll run the face through databases. Meanwhile, sit tight. Lock your doors." She laughed nervously. "This is Old Heights. We don't even have locks that work." "Get a new deadbolt tomorrow." He paused. "Maggie, you just became the only person holding proof of a decades-old murder tied to very dangerous people. Be careful who you trust." After the call, she stored the negatives in an archival sleeve, sealed her darkroom, and placed the Leica on her nightstand. The metal's weight offered odd comfort. Sleep came fitfully, full of shutter clicks exploding like gunshots. She awoke before dawn to the rumble of a van outside. Curtains parted, nothing but a delivery truck idling. Still, she dressed quickly and drove to the hardware store for deadbolts and motion lights. She installed them herself, fingers scraping wood, mind reciting f-stops to stay calm. At noon, Reyes called. "I've got partial confirmation. Facial recognition gives 82% likelihood that's Kincaid. Problem: there's chatter he resurfaced in South America last year, consulting for security contractors. So he's alive. Seems so. I'm pushing this upstairs, but red tape will slow everything. Maggie, someone may already know the film surfaced. Estate sales aren't exactly discreet. Did anyone see you buy that Leica?" She pictured the queue at the Radcliffe house. Antique dealers, eBay flippers, retirees. A tall man in a navy wool coat had stood behind her, hands clasped, no purchases of his own. He had a jagged scar down his left cheek. At the time, she'd thought nothing of it. "I'm not sure," she said. "Go somewhere public. Bring the negatives. Until I get a warrant, chain of custodies on you." The safest public place she knew was the downtown library's special collections room, a sanctuary of thick walls, constant staff presence, and cameras with 24-hour recording. She packed the Leica and negatives in a padded courier bag and drove there, heart rattling like a dark-room timer. In the archival reading room, high windows diffused autumn light across long oak tables. She nodded to Mr. Whitaker, the septuagenarian curator, and claimed a desk under a CCTV dome. Her phone buzzed, Reyes requesting photos of the other frames for context. She laid the contact sheet on the scanner and uploaded high-resolution files. As the last file transferred, the overhead lights flickered, once, twice, then returned to steady glow. She noticed a figure browsing microfiche cabinets, navy coat, scarred cheek. Her pulse spiked. She slid the negatives into her bag, rose and crossed to the curator's desk. "Mr. Whitaker, I need to step out. Could you keep an eye on my things?" "Certainly, Miss Hartwell." She hurried to the restroom, locked herself in a stall, dialed Reyes. Voicemail again. "Alan, I think someone's here. Scar on cheek, navy coat." When she emerged, Coat Scar Man was gone, but the outer door eased shut at the far end of the hall. She ran back to the table. Her bag was there, intact. She exhaled. Then she noticed the Leica missing from her shoulder strap. Panic burst inside her chest. She checked under the table, under chairs. Nothing. Only the camera was gone, the negatives still nestled in their envelope. She sprinted outside. The street teemed with midday pedestrians. A silver sedan peeled away from a hydrant, driver's face obscured by sun visor. Plate number blurred into traffic before she could note it. Back in the library, she found Whitaker confounded and apologetic. Security reviewed footage. A tall man in navy coat stooping beside her chair, unclipping the camera, sliding it under his coat, exiting in under 15 seconds. The time code showed it happened during the lighting flicker. He'd cut power momentarily to divert attention. Reyes finally returned her call. "Losing the camera narrows our margin, but negatives are the key evidence. Where are you now?" "Library, public," but public didn't help. "Meet me at the precinct in an hour. We'll get the film into evidence lockup." Margaret hailed a cab, changing vehicles twice to shake imaginary tails. She felt foolish, like an amateur spy, yet adrenaline sharpened every sense. She clutched the envelope so tightly her knuckles blanched. Reyes met her in the lobby. He wore the same rumpled blazer from college days, but new lines etched his eyes. He escorted her to a windowless interview room. 2 plainclothes detectives and a district attorney joined them. They photographed, logged, and sealed the negatives. Margaret provided a sworn statement. By evening, she was released with promise of updates. She returned to her bungalow exhausted. The motion lights she'd installed earlier cast pale cones across the yard. She brewed chamomile, sat on the porch swing, tried to decompress. Without the Leica, her shelf felt amputated, but knowing the negatives were safe steadied her. At 10:43 p.m., her phone rang from a blocked number. She almost let it slide to voicemail, but curiosity overrode fear. "Miss Hartwell," a gravelly voice said, "you have something that belongs to me." Her mouth dried. "Who is this?" "You know." He let the words drip. "Your friend at the precinct cannot protect you indefinitely. Return the film and this ends quietly." "It's already in police custody," she lied, testing. A low chuckle. "Not for long." The line clicked dead. She called Reyes. No answer. Minutes later, a rumble shook the night. She stepped off the porch. Plumes of smoke curled above the downtown skyline. Sirens wailed. She checked news feeds. Explosion in evidence annex. Fire spreading through archives. She dialed Reyes again. This time he picked up, coughing. "I'm okay," he said hoarsely. He hit the annex. Sprinklers slowed the blaze, but much is lost. "The negatives?" "Burned." His voice cracked. "I'm sorry, Maggie." Shock blotted her vision. "We scanned them. The files." Server cluster drowned by sprinkler water. Heat surge crashed backups. He covered every angle. She staggered to the porch rail, breath shallow. It was over. The proof was gone. Memories of the blonde's eyes open to the flash returned, accusing her failure. But then something surfaced through grief. Redundancy. She'd made a single contact sheet on fiber paper. It hung in her dark room. She'd forgotten to bring it to the precinct, intending to frame it later. The sheet wasn't as sharp as negatives, but forensic labs could extract detail. She whispered, "Alan, I still have the contact sheet." Silence then. "You're certain?" "Yes, at my house. He doesn't know." "Stay put. Patrol car en route." The cruiser arrived within minutes. 2 officers walked the perimeter while Margaret fetched the sheet. She gently peeled it from the drying line and slid it into a portfolio sleeve. The killer's face, slightly grainy but legible, stared out. She zipped the sleeve inside her coat, heart steadier now, a current of purpose replacing despair. From the porch, she saw a pair of headlights at the corner, engine idling. The navy-coated man leaned against the driver's door, phone pressed to ear. He spotted her and smiled thinly. One officer approached, hand on holster. The man raised both palms, slipped into the sedan, and disappeared. The officer radioed plates but got nothing. Vehicle reported stolen. Reyes insisted she go to a safe house. She packed overnight clothes, camera logs, and the portfolio. A plain sedan with unmarked plates transported her to an unused ranger cabin 3 counties away. Night frogs croaked outside. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and dust. Reyes arrived at dawn with coffee and an evidence technician. They used a high-resolution DSLR to photograph each frame on the contact sheet, bracketing exposures for maximum clarity. Software magnified pixels, sharpened edges. Kincaid's eyes glared across half a century. The district attorney petitioned the judge for an arrest warrant based on surviving evidence. Meanwhile, Interpol found Kincaid's recent alias booking a flight to Paraguay. US Marshals intercepted him at the airport. The Navy-coated accomplice, real name Victor Hale, attempted to flee but was caught at a storage unit containing the stolen Leica and several newspaper clippings about Margaret. 3 weeks later, Reyes visited her bungalow. She'd replaced the broken darkroom lock and added steel bars to the bathroom window. He handed her a signed photograph receipt. The contact sheet would remain in evidence until trial. "We couldn't have done it without you," he said. She poured them tea. Outside, leaves skittered along the sidewalk like spent flashbulbs. The adrenaline had ebbed, leaving quiet fatigue. Yet a flicker of pride glowed beneath. She'd given a murdered woman her overdue witness. "Funny," she said. "My hobby was supposed to honor the past, not drag it kicking into the present." Reyes smiled. History doesn't like to stay shelved. On his way out, he paused at her restored shelf of cameras. "Going to keep collecting?" She surveyed the ranks of gleaming metal bodies, their hollow chambers thirsting for light. "Of course," she said. "Every roll is a promise. We just have to be brave enough to see what develops."